at first I just thought I was seeing things that I was imagining, and then clearly I started seeing enough that it was not just me going crazy in the dark. um, and the squares became over the course of maybe the first 10 minutes, went from just being able to see little tiny bits of a portion of the square to seeing this whole sort of set of nested things, and it really almost in a way was like walking towards some light. I mean, it became such a big thing when the whole thing showed up that it was as bright as anything I could possibly imagine. And then when it went away for the last minute or so, I didn't know what to do.
There were always a sensation that never leave me. The completely lost of the sense of time.
That tunnel of light, I tried to at least conceptualize a few things, and I don't know, maybe think of death.
Threshold is a responsive environment exploring the borders of perception. The project is part of a larger three-part evening-length work examining the limit states of human experience, the moments and transition states where we fall in and out of consciousness, in sleeping, dreaming, and dying. Fundamentally, Threshold explores the relentless grasping for a fixed and stable self that vividly occurs during the process of meditation. Within such a practice, the mind seeks to avoid its natural grounding in impermanence and constant flux. This grasping for a permanent fixed self is that which the Buddhists call dukkha, or suffering. Through careful coordination of architecture, sound, light, material, and environmental sensing, Threshold creates a gradually shifting room that fluctuates on the verge of seeing and hearing, a room where oscillations of barely perceivable light and sound are directly influenced by the participants' aggregate breathing. On the research side, the project poses a challenge to task-based approaches to human-computer interaction. Instead, the project presents an ambient media environment where the participant is challenged to perform no task and essentially do nothing except for being present with their breath and bodies in darkness. Here, the standard one-to-one mode of human to computer is shifted toward the paradigm of inhabitant to environment interaction. The individual participants influence the environment, yet individual response and agency is dissolved into the aggregate. The first iteration of the project took place during the 2004 Transmediale in Berlin. The environment consists of 4 elements: architecture, light and sound, software and hardware, and visitor presence. Architecturally, the environment consists of 4 1 by 6 meter long tunnels. A series of screens made of muslin that rapidly absorb light are installed in each of the tunnels, spaced approximately 1 meter apart from each other. On the far end of each tunnel, a series of reflector tubes each holds 3 tiny but highly powerful blue-colored LEDs. The tubes are angled in such a way that the LEDs indirectly cast light onto the solid back screen. In addition, the environment features 6 channels of audio. 4 parabolic speakers and reflectors, which are situated at the end of each tunnel, enable the projection of a collimated sound beam down the length of the tunnel. A quadraphonic room speaker system set in the corners, and a subwoofer which is capable of delivering frequencies under 20 Hz completes the audio system. In order to hide the depth of the space from the visitors, the room is curtained off, with a very narrow space in the front of the room for the visitors to sit. 4 tunnels are partitioned off, physically separating the 4 visitors from each other. The visitors are brought into the pitch-black environment and remain seated in front of the tunnels for a duration of 15 minutes. They are told nothing about how the system operates, only to keep mindful of the breath. Over the course of 15 minutes, the room is monitored for the rate of change of CO2 coming from the aggregate breathing of the participants by way of a CO2 sensor. The changing percentage rate of CO2 is used to affect both the brightness of the LEDs as well as to start and stop various but subtle processes in the audio, influencing amplitude, filtering, and frequency of sound. As the intensity of the light is increased, for example, the shape and architecture of the room becomes faintly perceivable. As the brightness of the LEDs is decreased, the architecture appears to lose the affordances of its edges, fluctuating, and ultimately, for many, disappearing. These changes have the effect of very gradually shifting the threshold of what is visible and audible for visitors during the 15 minutes that they inhabit the room. The carbon dioxide data is picked up from a commercial environmental CO2 sensor and input into the computer by way of a commercial microcontroller. The microcontroller is scaled to accept 0 to 5 volts from the sensor, voltage that corresponds to the shifting CO2 levels in the room. CO2 data then enters the max programming environment, where it is filtered and smoothed to reduce noise. The software serves the crucial function of coordinating and choreographing the extremely delicate shifts of light and sound levels in the environment. As CO2 data during the course of the event more or less increases monotonically, the software is programmed to look for relative percentage changes over 1-minute intervals, rather than absolute percentage of CO2 in the room. Small percentage changes of CO2, usually brought on by noise and electronic jitter in the sensor, yield relatively small influences on the light and sound in the environment. Sometimes these changes are hardly perceivable. Other times they move extremely slowly. Large percentage swings in CO2 over the course of each polled minute, however, result in more noticeable effects, resulting in dramatic changes as the level of brightness of light and amplitude and frequency of sound oscillate above and below the threshold of perception. As revealed in subsequent interviews with all the visitors, the results of these differences in light and sound and the varying effects of temporality yield striking experiential effects. Due to the sheer difficulty of documenting the visitor's experience of the environment because of the extremely low levels of light and sound, interviews were conducted with all participants in the Berlin prototype in February 2004. The visitors were asked a series of simple questions designed to elicit a description of the experience. The technological means used in the installation appear simple at first. The extremely reduced level of ambient information yielded strong emotional responses. During the interviews, some visitors had doubts whether what they saw and heard was actually there. Many also had difficulty perceiving the actual depth of the space, or that there was any depth at all. This was evidenced by about 20% of those interviewed believing that the changing light inside the tunnel was actually a projected image on a flat screen in front of them. Most surprising was the fact that nearly half of those interviewed described experiences and visions akin to elaborate fantasies or even hallucinations. While no visitors were aware of the room sensing, many sensed an indirect relationship between the rhythm of their breath and the rate of change of the media. One visitor even went as far as to claim that the intensity of the light directly followed for her inhalations and exhalations. Visitors on days where the installation was full every hour described more violent shifts of light and sound than those who visited on quieter days. Less than 10% of those interviews saw the actual blue color of the LEDs, instead describing flickering, white noise, grayness, or more commonly red and green. Finally, more than 70% of those interviewed thought the room was actually physically changing, describing geometries that moved toward them and away, and shapes that grew and expanded only to disappear again. The interviews revealed not only a large percentage of strong emotional reactions to the installation, but also that no single individual saw or heard the exact same thing, although each of the 4 tunnels and media are identical to one another.
I think there were different senses of time. There was a time of waiting and seeing some death happen and arrive, and then seeing into a distance and seeing time far away, and then coming right into the far end of the square, which was like being on some, not a cliff edge, but some place that had an edge to it, and being there could take a long time, but then quickly coming back from it was sometimes a surprise. And by looking up and looking sideways and sometimes seeing figures dart across very quickly, more towards the end, then time was interrupted.
I thought I saw some blue patterns or some blue light pulsing at some point. And also thought I saw something which was a tunnel when you mentioned it actually. But
Yeah.
very briefly, just some sort of white thing. But almost like it could just have been on in my imagination. So.
Yes, it's you can choose to interpret it like a tunnel, or because there was different shades of brightness, or like an alpha channel, or but it could be just.
And for me, it was like a visual mantra when there are these images from these Tibetans that try to help people to just concentrate in a meditation state, and I thought it was a good thing to have at home, just to stop thinking.
There seemed to be a strange relationship between me focusing and watching. Or I would watch it for a little while, then I wasn't sure if it was actually dimming or if I wasn't paying attention any longer, so I would close my eyes and I would open again, and it would be in the same state it was before, but I would almost focus a little harder and it would become much brighter.
It was interesting when it got dark, I was just like thrown back onto myself. It was a bang, just very close.
Mm-hmm.
And then immediately when the light came up, space was there again. That was a very strange contrast actually.
Mm-hmm.
To have those. That was kind of a little bit aggressive. I felt some disorientation about that.
Ja, also ich habe dieses nicht als Raum eigentlich wahrgenommen, das Kleine. Also wenn man mich jetzt fragt, woran ich mich erinnere, es war so ein kleiner, dreidimensionaler Raum. Ich habe das Ganze nicht als Tunnel wahrgenommen, sondern wirklich punktuell, ganz klein und größer werden.
I came to town for Transmedial. I was doing something there, and I've been very disappointed by most of the works I've seen in the exhibition. Not so much because they're all bad or anything, but they're very statement driven, they're very politically minded. And, it seems to me with a lot of them, once you get past that layer of meaning with them, there's not very much underneath. And here, this is very inspiring to me in a way, in that it's trying to come from the opposite direction, to start with just the most basic of materials and start building up meaning from there.
Es hat mir so eine Lehre gegeben, die ich jetzt auch wieder hier gesehen habe, wenn man nur einfach eine ganz einfache, klare Geschichte erzählt, einfach alles ausblenden kann. Es ist auch mal eine Geschichte für sich, dass man eben nicht Multimedia parallel Informationen Multitasking, sondern hat man diese Sache raus, reduzieren, abschotten, gucken, dann genau 15 Minuten oder können wir auch länger machen, dann wieder raus und dann darüber eine gewisse Linearisierung seines Bewusstseins, wo in unserer Gesellschaft eher das Umgekehrte passiert. Früher hat man versucht, in den 80er, 90ern die Sache schneller und paralleler anzubieten. Mittlerweile die Gesellschaft hat diesen Status und man versucht quasi wieder auf diese Simplizität zurückzukommen, auf die Konzentration. Und das fand ich auch für mich eine subjektive, gute Erfahrung, dass es eine Situation ist, wo ich mich konzentriere und wo es mir leicht fällt, sich zu konzentrieren durch die äußere Umgebung. Ja.